The dishes from the previous night, loudly still in the sink, and no food on the stove. My father, Romildo, was in the area of backgrounds, playing dominoes with neighbors and laughing as if there were no bills. Expired items stacked in the kitchen drawer, all paid for by me. It wasn't a case of they were both in need. Perfectly healthy, capable of work, but decided that life was easier when someone carried everything. Behind my back. In this case, that person was me. After I turned 18, Romildo called for a big talk. As he said, I still remember his words. Now that you are older age, it's time to contribute, right, daughter? We will charge you rent for your room. And since you already work, you can take care of house bills also, electricity, water, market. I wanted to question these little things, but I couldn't do it. I had nowhere to go. No close relatives, no friends who could receive me. My parents knew of this and used it as a bargaining chip. Trapped there, with an invisible collar made of guilt and obligation. In the first months, I tried to see it as a temporary sacrifice. I saved a penny for penny, dreaming of the day I would have my own corner. But it always happened, something. A made-up emergency, supposed problem in the house that required repair. And of course, the money always came. 3 years passed for me. 3 years and then I became the mother of my own parents. Worked as a nursing assistant during the day and worked night shifts in a clinic on weekends. My body was tired, but the soul was much more exhausted. My friends at the clinic, some much older people, said that I needed to get out of that situation. This is emotional abuse, from a colleague I once said. You are being exploited, insisted the other. And I knew. I knew too much. But it's not easy to leave when all you have is what you yourself sustain. And yet, it is not enough to build something of your own. What I didn't know at that time was that Romildo and Joanna were already planning the next coup. And when it came, it wasn't just cruel, it was humiliating. Something that, for the first time in years, made me stop feeling fear. That made me hate. But not the kind that consumes, the type that builds. That night, after the argument, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just started making plans. And deep in my heart, I knew their time would arrive. It didn't take long for the stupido to happen. It was any Monday. I had worked all night and arrived at home just before 8 a.m. Exhausted, with back pain and throbbing legs. All I wanted was to take a hot shower and throw myself on the bed. But as soon as I walked in and came face to face with Romildo, waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, bitter expression. We need to talk, he said, without even saying good morning to me. Joanna appeared right behind, with that face of someone who had just left bed. Disheveled hair, stained shirt of coffee. They didn't even wait for me to put my bag on the floor. We decided to do some changes in the house, my mother started. This room there is not working. How could I? I frowned. What do you mean? Let's use it for something else, Romildo replied. I'm thinking about setting up a workshop repair there. I even spoke to Marcio da on the corner. He will lend me some tools. And where will I sleep? I asked in disbelief. Joanna shrugged her shoulders, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The back bathroom is empty. If you want to stay here, you can stay there. But you will continue to pay everything, of course. Nothing easy. I laughed a dry, bitter laugh. I couldn't contain it. You really want it, that I sleep in the bathroom? After all that I do? Romildo approached, putting his finger in my face. Complaining about what? If you want to continue under this roof, you will have to accept it, or fall outside. At that moment, something inside of me broke. Or maybe it has finally freed. I looked in the eyes of both of them and I didn't feel sadness. I felt a strange calm, as if I finally woke up from a nightmare. Okay, I replied. I prefer to go. Joanna opened her eyes wide. Are you joking? I'm not. Going out today. And don't worry, I leave the key on the table. They really laughed. They thought it was bluff. That I was going to back down, as always. But that night, I executed my plan. One plan that was already saved in my mind for months, maybe years. Because despite all the injustices, I never was just patient and tired. But I no longer. I started packing my clothes. But I didn't stop there. I picked up documents, cards, the old notebook. My dad, he made me set up a time and, through his carelessness, I had access to a lot of things. Bank accounts. Debts hidden in the paperwork. House financing that, on the contrary of what they always said, was still in the name of my late grandmother. And more. I discovered that my father owed more than 12,000 Brazilian reals, 1,000 Brazilian reals in outstanding loans. My mother's name was also dirty. And without my money, they would barely make it to pay the electricity next month. But what I really needed was what Romildo forced me to sign when I turned 18. An improvised contract that said that I rented the room for a while, undetermined. They thought it was a way to protect themselves legally. But I knew, it was just worthless paper. Even more, with the nonsense clauses that he himself scribbled. And it was this document that gave me the key to what I would do next. I wouldn't just leave. I was going to make sure they felt every penny of my absence. In the morning, next, Romildo shouted. And I, from the other side of the street, smiled when I heard it. But still, it wasn't the end. There was still more to come. That morning, as I watched from the opposite sidewalk, with my backpack on back and firm hands holding my cell phone, I heard the first screams of Romildo. A roar of anger mixed with despair. "What did you do, Eduarda?" he shouted from the door. The red face, hair disheveled. Behind him, Joanna appeared in shock, holding an envelope, torn. I knew exactly what was there inside. That night, before leaving, I left everything neatly organized. The torn contract on the table, accompanied by a copy of all transfer receipts, payment of invoices, markets, and even dental treatment. What my mother did with the money I had borrowed. Next door, I left one objective, cold letter, explaining that, from that moment on, I was no longer responsible for anything in that house. Or bills, rent, medicine, supermarket. And as a last gift, I entered the electric company's system, where the account was in my name. And I asked for the immediate shutdown. I did the same with the internet and with the telephone line. Everything in the name of Eduardo Santos. Everything legal. But what hurt them the most, and I know it hurt, was the warning I left about the house financing. I used the name of my grandmother, who was still listed as owner in the city hall system. I filed a request for reassessment patrimonial, pointing out that my parents were living in the property without a valid contract in possession. That would not take them out of the home immediately, of course. But it was freezing any action to sell or modify the property until the situation is regularized. And as neither of them could afford a lawyer or pay for regularization, they were locked. I heard Joanna shout my name, but I didn't turn around. I kept walking down the street with my head held high. For the first time, once in years, I felt light in the chest. Straight to a colleague's apartment from the clinic, Renata, who already knew everything. She welcomed me with a hug and a smile. "I knew you were going to leave like this," she said. "And now it's just the beginning." She offered me one of the rooms from her apartment, and I accepted without shame. For the first time, I accepted help, and I was liberated. 2 days later, I managed to increase my shifts at the hospital and started saving money for real. Without the emotional drain and my parents' finances, my salary finally worked for me. I bought new clothes. I went to the salon. I took off my passport. I was living. While this news from my old house, a neighbor, started to arrive. A card-carrying gossiper sent daily messages. "Eduarda, oh Romildo almost got into a fight with the energy man. They came to cut it. Joanna went to the market, trying to trust, believe. They are saying they are going to sell the TV in the living room." But what really got me was when she sent an audio, laughing. "Friend, your mother said she regrets everything, okay? Crying in the corners, saying she shouldn't have done what she did. She said now she understands the value you had in that house." Value. Funny word. This value is not what you have, it is what others recognize. And now they finally recognized it. But it was too late, too much. I was no longer afraid. And now I had a new plan, to build something that was just mine, something they would never again be able to touch. Freedom tastes of silence. A light silence. Without collections, without judgmental looks, without heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway. First night out of that house, I slept like I hadn't slept in years. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee made by Renata, and with the sunlight hitting my face. No voices screaming my name because the dishes were in the sink or the light in the corridor was lit. 2 months later, I was another woman. With the double shifts and some extra shifts at the ends, I managed to save money during the week, enough to rent my own corner. A small studio, but just mine. A new mattress on the floor, clean white walls, absolute silence. I painted one of the walls in moss green. I placed a shelf with my favorite books, and for the first time, I hung photos of myself, with no one around. Real photos of me smiling in a park, me drinking milkshake alone, lying in the hammock reading some book. And it was in this time of calm that I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to study something that my mother always said was a waste of time. Woman has to work, pay the bills, and shut up, she used to say. But now, I wanted more. I deserved it. I signed up for a nursing technician course. I started studying in the early mornings, between one shift and another. I slept little, it's true, but there was passion in the tiredness, and that made all the difference. Renata was helping me check the materials. She gave me strength when the body wanted to give up. And I was going, one day at a time. While there, on the other side of the city, Romildo and Joanna dived into ruin. The financing of the house was blocked. It prevented any reforms they were planning. The accounts, that I used to keep up to date, turned into a mountain of expired bills. The electricity was turned off twice, and neighbors said Joanna started selling brigadeiros on the street to try to raise some money. Romildo tried to open that workshop in my old room, but it didn't even last 2 weeks. No one trusted a man who screamed at his daughter on the street. No one felt sorry. No one offered to help. I think, deep down, everyone knew it a long time ago, who they were. One night, I received a call. It was a number that I would recognize even with my eyes closed. I reached to refuse, but I let it ring. Then I heard the voicemail. It was Joanna. Eduarda, daughter, if I can still call you that. We made a mistake. I know that you made a mistake, but it's difficult here. You could know. Come and talk to us, even if it's just to explain these home paperwork. Or, I miss you. It hurts. There's silence, a lot here. I faced the phone for a while. I sighed deeply, and I deleted the message. No. I shouldn't have anything to do with them anymore. The following week, I went to the practical test of the course. In a short time, I would have the certificate in hand and more opportunities. I received an offer to work in a new clinic with better salary. With the first payment, I bought a large closet and a double bed. That same night, I lay down on the new mattress and I cried, but not from the pain, from relief. For the first time, I was my own person. This was just the beginning. A few months later, graduation. Already with the certificate of nursing technician in hand, and with life taking a new direction, an idea started to grow in my head. At first, it was just a seed, but it grew, taking root with every shift I did, with each patient I cared for, each praise I received from the team. You have talent for this, Eduarda, said Valkyrie, head nurse of the clinic where I worked. And more than that, you have a heart. Have you ever thought about starting a business? The word kept echoing in my mind for days. Undertake? I never imagined that I would. A girl who slept crying because her mother threatened to throw her clothes in the trash would be hearing this from a professional so respected. But it was true. I had skill, knowledge, will, and now, for the first time, I had peace to think big. I started planning my own business. I pooled the savings I had. I looked for student credit that was available, that I let pass in my youth. I asked for guidance from friends and colleagues, experienced ones. With the help of Renata, who became my partner and life partner, we rented a small commercial space and we opened the care service, home care and welcoming nursing with a humanized approach. We started serving the elderly and people with mobility difficulties who needed help at home. In a few weeks, the phone didn't stop ringing. The clinic grew. We hired 2 more technicians and we started doing partnerships with doctors and psychologists in the region. In 3 months, we were operating in rotating shifts. In 6, we managed to expand to another neighborhood. And then, as it always happens, the past tried to beat the door. One day, while organizing some papers on the clinic counter, I heard the door open and the familiar sound of heavy footsteps. I looked up, and there was Romildo. Thinner, with tired-looking hands, calloused, holding a crumpled cap. Eduarda, he murmured, as if the name weighed in his mouth. What do you want here? I came to apologize. I kept my gaze steady. He looked smaller than I remembered, a defeated man. Me and your mother, we lost everything. The house. The workshop. He stopped, taking a deep breath. And now she's sick. In need of care. I heard about your business. Thought maybe you could. I smiled. But not mockingly, with relief. Because at that moment, I was sure of whose daughter I was. I can't. But I can recommend some companies to you. This is only for people who respect me. He lowered his head and walked away, without saying anything more. That night, I lay down on my bed, yes, my real bed, and I looked at the ceiling for a while. I thought about everything I experienced. Everything. I silently endured everything. I had to open up, had to get there, and I thanked, because it was pain that taught me to build. And now, I was made of bricks and steel. Nothing and no one else would bring me down. The time passed quickly after Romildo's visit, and for the first time, the days didn't hurt at the clinic. Service continued to grow. The household gained prominence in the city. To my surprise, we were nominated for the Female Entrepreneurship Award. The location was symbolic, but it meant I had left the bathroom where my mother wanted me to sleep. Being among women who changed lives, Renata and I received invitations to speak at colleges, participate in interviews, and tell our story. I was always hesitant at the beginning. I didn't like putting myself in the spotlight. But something inside me knew it was what other girls needed, knowing that there was a way out, that to withstand the unbearable was not destiny, it was a prison. And that it was possible to escape. It was in that moment of flowering that a new opportunity arose. I received an email from a national network of health clinics. Integrated Care had heard of me through one of the interviews. They wanted to talk about a partnership. This is too big, Eduarda, said Renata, while reading the email for the third time. They don't contact just anyone. We are being seen. We went to the meeting in a glassed building in the center. Everything was new, polished, full of promise. They wanted to invest, expand care, and welcome other regions to start a franchise with our brand and methodology. I listened carefully to everything, but with a calm heart. None of that seduced me more than the certainty that I was in control of my life. I signed the contract 2 weeks later, with clauses that guaranteed my autonomy and total influence on the clinic's decisions. It was a victory on so many levels, it barely fit into words. And then, like a plague, the old woman who insists on returning, Joanna, appeared. She entered the clinic without an appointment, without publicity, wearing an outfit that clearly wasn't hers. Pale, haggard, without the strong makeup from before. I just came to thank you, she said in a low voice, because you didn't return what we did with hatred. For letting me fall on my own. I didn't do it because you did it for me. She nodded, and before leaving, she left a little box on the counter. I waited for her to go out to open it. A keychain inside, with the letters and that I had done at school when I was 8 years old. On the back, it was scribbled, Eduarda, our pride. I laughed a small, emotionless laugh. I closed the box and placed it at the bottom of the drawer, because we are proud of those who are by our side when no one else is. I already knew who was in mine. At that time, the same night, I announced to the employees, we were expanding the clinic. We will establish branches in 3 more cities. One of the technicians started crying. Another one hugged me. Inside, I just breathed deep and smiled. Because finally, after everything, life smiled back at me. And it wasn't a fake-looking smile. It was sincere, it was true, it was deserved. The first branch of Quadaria Calher was opened in March. The second, 2 months later. And now, as I write these words, we are about to open the third, in a neighborhood that, ironically, is just 5 blocks from the house where I lived with my parents. House, not home, because that place was never a home. I decided to go see it one last time. Not out of nostalgia, but because finally, I'm on the other side of the street. The gate was rusty. The garden, taken over by tall grass. The windows had cracks, and the for sale sign hung crookedly, hanging by a loose thread. It was a house without a soul, as if all the poison that kept it standing had evaporated. I stayed there for about 5 minutes. Then I left, without knocking, without looking back. At the clinic, I prepared a surprise for our team. A mural at the entrance, with photos of all the patients attended throughout the year. Collages made by families, drawings by kids, thank you notes. At the center, I wrote a sentence, here, no one sleeps in the bathroom. Everyone has a place here. It was applauded, without anyone knowing what it really meant. In that same week, I was approached by an NGO that takes care of young people expelled from home by their parents. Many of them LGBTQIA, and others only victims of emotional and physical abuse. They were seeking support for a shelter and wanted our clinic to offer a basic health plan for those welcomed. I accepted on the spot, and more, I donated part of the profit from the new branch to help restructure the NGO space. I asked them to put comfortable beds, walls with bright colors, books, pillows. And that every room had the name of a flower. I wanted to guarantee that no one there would grow up with the feeling that they took up too much space. On the day of inauguration, one of the teenagers who lived there came to me. "You helped all this happen," she said shyly. "A little, yes," I smiled, "but it was you who had the courage to stay." "That's harder." She hugged me, and at that moment, I knew my mission was not to prove anything to Romildo or Joanna. It was to prove it to myself. That I could build something beautiful, right on top of the rubble they left. Today, my house has open windows, the smell of fresh coffee, and a garden with lavenders. Renata and I live with 2 cats, a dog called Bento, and frequent visits from friends who became family. I never needed to pay rent to live in peace again. And when I think about the past, I don't feel angry. I feel pride. Because I was called ungrateful, rebellious, and exaggerated. But I was just fair, to me. I left without shouting. But I let the cries of regret echo by themselves. And even without having heard every word, I know they echoed. Because when freedom arrives, it makes more noise than any slammed door.